Hello, everybody. Welcome to Fruitful Trees. Here I am in front of a tree I recently transplanted. I moved it from another location. This is my Neelam tree, and I found it pretty amazing that I planted this, and it's already growing some mango bloom, and it's pretty early in the season to be growing mango bloom. And I found out, or figured this is because it's a transplant, and the tree was dying and it's trying to stay alive. It's not best to keep these blooms on here. However, it is November 16th right now as I'm filming this video, and we are uh, visiting Tropical Acres Farms today. And Alex is going to show us some of his well-established long-term mango trees that already have some early bloom that he's expecting to get early mangoes this year. So we're going to check them out now and see that. And some other people, since I made a video about this tree, have told me they're seeing some early bloom on their trees. So if it's not a transplant, I think it's good to keep the early bloom on there if that variety is known to fruit early. But if it is a transplant, I take them off there like I did here. And not just to cut the panicles off, because then it'll try to grow back and flower again. But when you see the little mangoes appear, just take those off. This is a really cool video with Alex showing us some of his trees that are doing an early transplant. Now, I went there last week, which was still early November, so check it out. Here we are at Tropical Acres Farms. This is Alex, and we are right now November 11th, 2022. And typically it's quite early for trees to be flowering, but some do flower at this time. And Alex, tell us what's going on here and what's flowering.
Sure. So we actually do have some trees flowering at this point. It's not unusual for us to already have trees flowering before Thanksgiving here in West Palm Beach. We are in the city of West Palm Beach in South Florida. And so certain varieties are much more easy to trigger to bloom than others. We have a lot of Edward trees on this property that the Sturocs planted a long time ago that are very large, and those trees tend to flower early. But we also have some trees that were planted more recently of different varieties, and even those young trees have some bloom coming out of them right now. So I'll go over what some of those mangoes are and how substantial their bloom happens to be. Any fruit that comes from this bloom that you see now here in November is fruit that would be maturing during the spring, not the summer. So we're talking about fruit that would be maturing in March and April, if it holds the fruit to maturity. So behind me here is a row of, partial row of Rosy Gold mangoes. This one's just starting to send some panicles out now. Okay, you can see these here. The tree behind it is a little further ahead, which always seems to be the case for some reason. This tree's always a little later to bloom, but you can see actually it already set a few fruit on it. We did have, unfortunately, some of them were likely blown off by Hurricane Nicole, which rolled through here just a day or two ago, actually. But fortunately didn't do any major damage to the trees. And but you can see it's still got panicles coming out here. Well, this one has little fruit set on it. And then this Rosy Gold next to it also has some bloom coming out. It's not 100%. You can see that there's bloom up here in the canopy, but the lower canopy here, the stems are still dormant, okay? There are a few still popping out here. And likely what will happen is that once we get further into the winter and we get some more cold fronts roll through, the remainder of these canopies should flower after that. This is a response most likely from, two factors. One is that we had some cool weather actually that occurred over the course of a few days during the month of October. Of course, a lot of the trees, their stems are not old enough at that point to respond to bloom stimuli, but some of them, the easier to flower varieties like Rosy Gold, don't need as much rest for the stems before they respond to a cold front, and they don't need quite as much cold weather to get them to kick. So, but also with our big Edward trees here, there is likely a response to the change in photo period. And that's how, like, for example, last year we saw a pretty substantial bloom on our Edward trees before this point, before we had any cold weather. So these large Edward trees behind me here, probably focus the camera up towards the top of the canopy. There you can see a lot of bloom coming out of the top of that Edward tree, and also some coming out of the neighboring Edwards as well. but this one in particular seems to have the most at the moment. We have a few other Edward trees on the farm that are doing the same. So they've got flowers coming out. The big question is whether those flowers will come out with enough females to set fruit and carry some mangoes into the spring. We'll see. You never know until you get a closer look at them, at least. So hopefully we get at least a decent number of ratio of female flowers amidst those panicles, and we'll end up with some spring Edwards come March or so. But I'll go over some of the other mangoes that we've got that are flowering, or at least throwing a little bit of bloom at the moment. Actually, Paul, this Carrie behind you here has some bloom coming out. So this is a Carrie mango with a little bit of bloom coming out of the top center of the canopy. And you can see those branches there have some panicles starting to emerge as well. Okay,
Yep.
so we'll walk over and look at some of the other ones that are starting to...
Something I notice here is coming here, and maybe I'm completely wrong, but it always seems like your early blooms are in this area. Is that just not really,
well, we have... I will say that the Edward trees over here usually bloom a little more enthusiastically than the ones back there, but a number of the ones back there have been pruned over the last 4 years, and those ones that have been pruned fairly significantly are much less likely to have that really, really early bloom. They do flower, though, like once we get more closer to the regular bloom period. But you're right, we also have all these Rosy Golds over here, and so those flower pretty easily as well. Okay, we'll take a look at a couple others that are flowering. Okay, over here we've got a Dwarf Hawaiian mango.
wow, Dwarf Hawaiian, look at that.
Yeah, Dwarf Hawaiian with quite a bit of bloom on the top.
Wow.
And then it also, actually, if you look at the stems here, Paul, they're swelling up and they're looking like they're going to bloom as well. So we're probably going to see a little bit more flowering coming out of this. In fact, you can see some more bloom emerging here.
Wow, Dwarf Hawaiian. How many Dwarf Hawaiian trees do you have here?
What's that?
You have a lot of Dwarf Hawaiians here, right?
Yeah, I think we have a few dozen of them. I mean, a number of them are planted in temporary spots, so they won't be there forever necessarily, but we have a number of permanent in-ground Dwarf Hawaiians, and they're one of our more popular varieties, and they flower so easily. I can't understate, or overstate rather, how easily these trees bloom. A few nights of cold and off they're going, and sometimes they'll even flower when there's no cold. So, and they'll usually flower multiple times. I mean, it's not unusual for us to get 3 or more blooms off our Dwarf Hawaiian trees during the course of a year. So we'll get multiple crops from them, which is cool. So,
Of all the trees, not the new trees you planted or the old trees that have been here for a long time, like the Edward, but of all your trees in general, Dwarf Hawaiian, you planted a significant amount, pretty much.
we planted a lot of it. Yeah, it's not the one that we planted the most of necessarily, but we planted a lot of it because, one, it's a small tree. This tree was planted in 2014, summer of 2014 as a, not summer, I'm sorry, we planted this around January 2014, I think, as like a small 3-gallon tree, very small, almost like a 1-gallon size tree, I think. And the trees around it have grown a lot taller for the most part. If we go back here, for example, this tree right behind it is an Alfonso mango. You can see how much larger it is. That Alfonso has been cut back hard multiple times. We've never had to do that to this Dwarf Hawaiian. So I like the fact that you can fit them in between other trees and in relatively tight spaces. And I love the fact that they flower so easily here. With these warm winters we've been getting for the last decade here in South Florida, not all mangoes flower well anymore, but this one can be relied upon to flower year after year. And in our climate over here, close to the coast, we don't really have any disease issues on this tree, or very minimal disease issues. And I like that aspect of it. Of course, the popularity of the fruit. I love the fruit personally, but we get a lot of customers that ask for it specifically by name. And when you're getting that, then you know that you better have more than one of them, that you should have actually quite a few of them. So yes, we've planted a lot of it here. I've top worked trees into Dwarf Hawaiian. So I like it a lot. It's another one that I like a lot. And Chris Wenzel deserves credit for actually being the one that really popularized it, because before she was growing it here, it wasn't common. It was not very well known, but it's become one of our more widely grown varieties here on the farm, and one of the more popular mangoes.
And this one's blooming. What about your other ones?
Yeah, we have a few others that have some bloom coming out of them. Their main bloom won't come until just sometime in December, I think. Once we get a real cold front that spans more than, let's say, a day or two, like a 5-day cold front or whatever, will trigger all the Dwarf Hawaiians to flower most likely. So and that's okay. Because I found that the earlier bloom on Dwarf Hawaiian tends to produce more male flowers anyway, so we get actually better fruit set from the later bloom, and that later bloom will actually still, because the fruit develop relatively quickly, it will still sometimes have some mangoes during the spring period. So we'll be getting like late April or May from those blooms, we'll get Dwarf Hawaiian fruit. This would be like early spring fruit if it held on to the fruit to maturity and actually set quite a few. We'll see, but we'll definitely get Dwarf Hawaiian fruits at some point this coming year. Okay, so let's look at another one here. So this is a Madame Francis mango, and it had some early bloom. In fact, this panicle here has a little bit of fruit set on it already. See if we can get a closer look at this. So you can see there's some little mangoes here developing. We'll see how many this actually holds on to. Remember, these trees did get a little beat up by the wind.
Now, I had a small tree that I replanted, and it had that same thing, and you were saying if it's a small tree to transplant, it might be good to take those mangoes off.
Yeah, if it's a small tree that you're trying to get established into the ground, or a new pot or whatever, you don't want that tree expending a lot of energy trying to mature fruit. So it's best to usually strip those little mangoes off instead of breaking the flower off, because if you break the flower off, a lot of times it'll try to flower again. So you just strip those little mangoes off, let it dry out, let the tree think that it just didn't hold on to any of its fruit, and give it a chance to grow a little bit more, develop some canopy so that the roots can develop. And once it's a little larger, hopefully in a year or two, you can let it hold on to those mangoes. Obviously, this isn't an example of that, though. This is a tree that actually I transplanted from my farm in Loxahatchee a long time ago. I had a number of Madame Francis trees out there. I want to say like 3 or 4 of them, and this was one of the ones that I decided to bring over here. So Jack and I brought this here, and it's been fruiting for a while. It had a nice crop last year, and maybe we'll get a few early fruit on it. It's got actually fall on this side of the tree. It's also got some bloom on the top of it too, just a little bit.
Now,
so again, just a partial bloom. But
besides Haitians and maybe Jamaicans, is this a popular fruit besides with them?
It's mostly requested by customers from Haiti, but we get people that are curious about it, that want to try it, or they want to compare it to the ones from the grocery store, because we do import Madame Francis fruit from Haiti.
Not you here, the country does. The supermarkets do, you're saying.
Right, exactly. You're right. Yeah, no, we don't.
Yes.
Tropical Acres Farms does not import any of our fruit, but like Publix.
This is a common one you could find in a store.
Yeah, you can find it sometimes at supermarkets, and they'll call it just. A lot of times they'll call it just Haitian mango.
Yeah.
They've also come up with some marketing names for it, but I find that the ones grown here are much better than those imported ones, and that's not to say that if you go to Haiti you can't find good Madame Francis. I'm sure you can, but they're usually picked too green when they import them here. And also they go through hot water treatment and stuff, and I don't think that's good for them either. So like the ones that we've sampled that were imports are usually extremely fibrous, and actually some of the Madame Francis grown in Florida can be that way too. I found that if you grow it without any nitrogen inputs, and if you grow it in like relatively sandy soil, that it's actually not too terribly fibrous and can be enjoyable. But it's, like you said, it's a mango that's usually requested by people from Haiti, which is fine. We like having this mango available for them. This is the only Madame Francis tree we do have, but we have a couple other Haitian varieties here on the farm This one just so happens to throw early bloom more often than mangoes like the other Haitian mangoes like Baptiste and Madame Blanc and Corn. Those usually wait until the primary bloom period before they start to show anything. It's not unusual to see Madame Francis throwing some of this fall bloom, we'll call this.
Nice. Okay. Got any more?
Yeah, I do. We'll go over this way and I'll show you another one that's got. I mean, there's a number of trees that have like a stray bloom here and there, but we won't have time to go over all of them. But I'll show another one. So. By the way, this is another Dwarf Hawaiian, and it's got flowers emerging, or panicles emerging now, actually on quite a bit of the canopy. I hadn't looked at this one recently, but it looks like actually most of this canopy is going to flower. So this one, and then this right next to it is a Rosy Gold that's got some bloom coming out of it too. But let's take a look at this Rosa mango over here. So this is Rosa from Brazil. Over in Brazil, I think they pronounce it Rosa, but we have a couple of these on the farm, and it's always one of the ones that's most likely to throw some fall bloom, but it will also flower again later on. And actually, it's encouraging to see there's actually pretty good fruit set. Sometimes these early blooms on Rosa can have a lot of male flowers, but this one looks like it's making quite a bit of females, at least at first glance. So maybe we'll get some spring fruit off of this Rosa tree. Paul, behind you over here is Tess Pollock. Tess Pollock has bloom emerging on parts of the canopy. You can see some at the top that's a little further along, but it looks like these stems are going to flower too. So this one,
is a nice mango, right?
Yeah. And this is another one that will usually bloom multiple times for us. We usually get at least 2 full blooms off this tree, but the first bloom usually is disproportionately male, and we get very few fruit off that first bloom. The second bloom is usually more substantial. Let me check the flowers on this guy here. Well, actually, we're getting a little better luck here this time, it looks like, because you can see definitely quite a few female flowers in there.
How can you tell the flowers?
So the females are actually not true females, they're hermaphrodites, so they actually have both parts. So they'll have a pistil and a stamen. The males only have the stamen. It's going to be probably really hard to show on the video here the difference between them. But when you're in person, it's easier to see. And let me see if I can demonstrate with my fingertip here. Okay, we've got a female flower here. Okay, you've got your pistil right there. And then right there is the stamen. That's the male part of the flower. And I'll try to show a male flower here that's only got the one part. Right here, this one at my fingertip is a male. So it only has a stamen, it does not have a pistil.
Okay.
So I don't know how well that came out, but
Okay.
if we have, maybe we need like a magnifying glass or something to help people.
All right, that's Tess Pollock. Okay.
Yeah, that's Tess Pollock. So Tess Pollock, over here, at least in West Palm Beach, is a consistent early blooming mango. This is the only tree we've got of it, only example we've got, but it's definitely not unusual to have a few spring mangoes off of this and then have more in the summer period. So this is definitely going to flower again. I would be shocked if it didn't, but maybe we'll get a little more than usual off of this early bloom from it.
Great. So the whole point of the early bloom is just a signal or a sign of how the season's going to be for that particular tree, right?
Well, maybe, maybe not. I mean, if you get an early bloom and you get decent fruit set off of that early bloom and it doesn't get blown off by thunderstorms or winds or whatever, and it doesn't get affected by disease, because that early bloom and early fruit set can get impacted by disease as well, by anthracnose and powdery mildew and whatnot. If you can avoid that, then you can definitely get fruit in spring. And of course, in colder areas, you have to worry about frost damage or cold damage to that early bloom and early fruit set. Here, not so much, because we don't really have that problem, as our climate is more warm than the interior parts of Florida or the more northern areas of Florida where people are growing mangoes. In those areas, it's a lot less likely that you're going to see early fruit, like spring fruit, off of your blooming mangoes. But even here, like in my experience, the fruit set and retention rates and even the quality are often better on mangoes that are flowering, let's say in December, January, February, March. So more likely to make it to maturity at least.
All right, everybody, you can get the mangoes, the trees, the budwood, everything at Alex's website, tropicalacresfarms.com. I'll put the link below the video. And anything else you want to add?
No, maybe, Paul, in the next couple weeks or so, we'll see some more bloom coming off of some other varieties. Like I mentioned, these are not the only varieties that are flowering for us a little bit at the moment, just a few that I remembered while we were walking around here. But you'll see a lot more, we hope, in December, January, February, March, depending on what kind of weather we receive between now and then. So let's hope for a nice, cool winter, not freezing, but cool, cold winter where we can get at least some cold fronts that stretch over the period of 7 days. 2 weeks would be ideal. If we can get something like that during the coming winter, I would anticipate a lot of stuff flowering here. And let's hope that we don't get too much vegetative growth flush from all this rainfall that we've received from this hurricane that just rolled through, and the trees stay relatively calm and dormant until they're ready to flower. So
sounds good. We'll follow up with you in a couple of weeks. And everybody, put your comments and questions below. And thank you for your time, Alex.
Thanks, Paul.
Okay, everybody, there it was. That was Alex at Tropical Acres Farms. I'm going to put the link below the video. And he always has graphs, trees, and during the season mangoes for sale. So check them out. Thank you, Alex, for showing us some of your trees so we can get excited for the next mango season. So put below this video in your comments what trees you have that are blooming early and how your future mango season is looking. Have a great day, everybody, and keep growing.